Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Talking Ted Lasso here on the It's a Wonderful Podcast YouTube channel. It's getting quite intense, Jeannine, in
Yes.
in in multiple different ways, in incredibly emotional
Yeah,
ways, really, isn't
definitely.
it? I feel like we've got a very strong 1-2 punch today with today's 2 episodes of Ted Lasso. Obviously, we are just over or just about halfway through season
Mhm.
2 of Ted Lasso now, because it's slightly longer than
Yeah.
season 1. And I mean, we really end with our or the latter part of our second episode today in very, very tough watching scenarios, I suppose, don't we?
Yeah.
But eventually kind of relieving ones, I suppose. That'll make sense when we obviously come to talking about it. And I think throughout the course of season 2 already, we've seen a lot more focus on therapy as a theme
Yeah.
of this whole show. And really, all of that comes to the forefront, I think, in both of these episodes. The first one that we've got to talk about today is season 2, episode 7. It's called Headspace. So, of course, it is a lot to do with therapy and things like that, and primarily focuses on Ted's reluctance to see his therapy through. Really,
Yes.
he comes to his appointments, he tries, and then goes on a bit of a tirade for 2 minutes before storming out every time.
Yeah. Yeah. He has a really tough
And
relationship with that, and we learn why, through the course of these 2 episodes.
yeah, it's very tough to watch, and I think for a show that has always presented itself as a comedy, obviously, a bit of lightness,
A feel good
something
kind of
to a
show.
bit of a feel good kind of show, to have so much within it that is actually quite difficult, that is actually quite, um, I say difficult, almost like understandably difficult. I mean, kind of wonderfully difficult almost, because
Yeah.
it gets you through a certain, necessarily difficult, I suppose, is the best way
Yeah.
of putting it. Not difficult for difficult's sake. It's not just all of a sudden turned miserable or
Yeah.
anything like that. It's doing it all for a purpose. It's doing it all for a relieving feeling, a
Yeah.
feeling of relief, a feeling of freedom, a feeling of kind of ease that
Yeah.
comes from it. That a lot of characters mask, in the early
Mhm.
part of this show, and it's finding it, seeking it out, smacking it in the face, some would say quite literally sometimes,
Yeah.
and getting over it through doing that, um, which is very, very poignant, really, isn't it? That's what we're dealing with, I think, in these 2 episodes today. We'll get straight into it, but poignant feeling
Yes.
is the predominant one for me. So, what have we got going on aside from Ted's therapy in season 2, episode 7, Headspace?
Yeah, I think they kind of open the episode in a fun little way that also kind of delves into one of the storylines that we're going through in this episode, and we get to see kind of the routine of Keely and Roy.
Yeah,
As soon as she wakes up, he's awake staring at her. She is in the
he's
fridge.
very
He's on.
intense anyway,
Yes,
isn't he? But
he's waiting on the other side. He literally is just right there in her face, saying hi to her every 5 seconds. They go to work together, and then she parts ways with him, and he asks her immediately, "Where are you going?" "Oh, I was just gonna get a coffee," because he notices she's not going towards her office. And she's like, "Oh, I was just gonna go get a coffee. Can I come with you?" And she's just like, "Sure, of course." And so he goes with her, but then we kind of see her give a little bit of this look like, "Ugh," this kind of
yeah,
fed up look. So yeah, that we deal with Roy and Keely feeling, that Roy is, smothering her a little too much. It feels a little bit claustrophobic for her, but she doesn't know how to tell him because he's just so sweet and he's such a good guy. So she ends up kind of going around talking to everyone about this problem, And I love kind of the honesty of when Roy kind of walks in on these conversations of that she's having with like a fairly decent group of people. And he asks, "Are you talking about me?" And she's like, "Yeah." Even if everyone else is trying to like,
Yeah.
save her and say no, she still is always very honest and says, "Yes, we're talking about you." And even when the reveal of that, and she thought he was okay with it because he knew that they were talking about him, but he thought it was just like stupid stuff about like all the hair he leaves in the drain and things. Not that he's like this needy little whiny guy. So then he gets really embarrassed. So I like the kind of layers of honesty that they have in their relationship, but obviously she has been kind of keeping a fairly big relationship secret from him, even
Yeah.
though they do have pretty good communication.
They do. It's an interesting one to think about, really, because Roy is very intense, but he's not vocal, is he? He's not kind of like he won't talk to you all the time, or he won't be in your face going on and on and on and on and on all the time.
No.
He will kind of just be there staring.
Yes.
And that is it's a different kind of intensity to, I think, what we often think of when we hear people in, various types of relationships, wherever they may be, whoever they may be,
Yeah.
say, my partner is too intense, my partner is smothering me, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
This is not the same kind of thing. Like, he's
Yeah.
doing that simply by just being there all the time.
Yes,
And
his presence, because
he,
even because even she kind of mentions that he's like, hey, she says, "Hey, I got work to do. Just go sit over there quiet and read your book." And so he immediately,
yeah,
without hesitation, goes and does that. But even him just listening to her is a turn on, and then she can't get what she wants done because he's just turning her on by listening to her. So
yes.
yeah,
It doesn't, none of it takes away from the love we have for that relationship. I don't
yeah,
think the fondness we have from that for that relationship.
yeah,
It is just a little bit of a step to further understanding each other,
yeah,
I guess. And it needed to be said more directly to Roy,
yeah,
didn't
yes,
it? It needed to be said in this way of, you're always there, please don't just always be there, rather
yes,
than a little bit of insinuation every now and again,
yeah,
and these eye rolls every so often from Keely,
yeah.
because he is just he comes in with the best intentions all the time.
And that's why I think she's afraid to say something, because she's like, I have this perfect boyfriend. What do I have to complain about? And I feel like maybe I'll hurt his feelings, or maybe it'll come off as selfish if I just tell him that I need some space because he seems to always want to be with me. So why, I'll feel bad if I kind of make him feel bad about that. So that's, I think, why she struggles with just straight up telling him. But then it builds and builds to the point where she just screams at him and kind of
Yeah,
embarrasses him, and then makes it known that she's going around telling everyone about this. And so he then it just becomes worse than it needed to be, because she kind of let it build up because she had these hesitations in telling him.
yeah, and he's obviously kind of annoyed himself in this moment because he wants to do, or the right thing for
Yeah,
that
by her.
relationship
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
um and he gets intense. Is this the same episode as well where has he's called into Phoebe's school about Phoebe swearing all the time?
Oh yeah, I
um
think that might
it,
be in the next one, but I'm not
if it's
sure.
if it's in the next one, I think it all encompasses the
Yeah.
same kind of
Yeah.
story as well. Roy wanting to always do best by those he cares about the
Yeah.
most, but sometimes those people feeling like, because he is so gruff all the
Yeah.
time, can they really tell him what, when they do tell him, he takes on board perfectly fine, but
Yeah.
just has this kind of loud exclamation reaction in the
Yeah.
immediate term.
Yeah.
That's kind of just the person he is, and I suppose anybody that does know Roy best would know that. And
Yeah.
Keeley obviously knows Roy pretty well
Yeah.
at this point. So she would know that, and it ends up, perfectly okay. But it's an interesting little, blocker for a time in that
Yeah.
relationship.
Because I mean, even when after he yells at her, he leaves, he storms out. And then the next day, um, they go to work separately and she tries to say hi to him and he like completely ignores her.
Yeah.
So it's
And
this
that's just taking it to the complete opposite
yes.
extreme.
He's like, well, if that's what you want, then fine. Um,
I
so
kind of
yeah,
get it though. I kind of
yes,
get it. I mean,
yeah,
it's I think he's just kind of he's very simple minded. And that's not a negative way of
yeah,
being. That is just a you tell me something and that is what I will do. Or
yes.
you tell me that something exists in a certain way and that is how it exists. And
Yeah, he
mine and
doesn't
because it's Roy
overcomplicate
Kent and he's
things. Yeah,
stubborn minded, his opinion isn't going to change on that. His feelings aren't going to change on that.
yeah,
So it stands with his relationship as well. He loves Keeley, so he loves Keeley. And that's
yeah,
not going to change.
yeah,
It's that kind of barefaced stubbornness to a fault
yeah,
that Roy Kent just embodies perfectly. And when he's confronted with it, I suppose, it takes him half a day to kind of realize, fine, all right,
yeah.
I'll just do whatever you want.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
runs her a
So
bath.
yes, so then, she comes home and she's, like, worried that he's, like, packing up, getting ready to leave her or something, and, he takes her into the bathroom and he's made this beautiful bath for her full of rose petals, and obviously it's Roy, so he has to throw in there, "I stole all of these roses from your neighbor." His nice music playing, candle set, and,
Yeah.
he says he'll leave her alone for at least 3 hours, and, so, yeah, he kind of takes into listening to her, even though, her delivery wasn't the best, and when she finally did tell him, but
No.
he takes that in, and he takes that time that they were apart to really think about what she said and what she needs and how she feels, and so the kind of emotional, intelligence and the emotional maturity he has, you would think kind of feels like a surprise for who he is because he's kind of this very simple person, like you said. Um, so for him to have such immense emotional intelligence is really great to
Yeah.
see, and see it as illustrated in this type of thing where he draws her this nice bath, and he says, "I will leave you alone," and she's just very excited, and it's perfect. So yeah,
Yeah, it's nice. We love Roy and Keeley. We
yes,
always
yes,
love Roy and Keeley. We hope nothing bad ever happens to Roy and Keeley.
yeah,
And I don't obviously know what goes on in the future of Ted Lasso, but we certainly hope that, or I do at this point,
yeah.
regardless. Ted, though, really goes through the ringer in the
Yeah,
episode. I
yeah.
mean, he's very cruel to Dr. Sharon, really,
Oh,
a lot of the
yeah.
time. This is the worst Ted's ever behaved to another human being, I
Yeah.
feel, in how he
Yes.
behaves to Dr. Sharon. He's rude to her, he's
Yeah.
insulting of her profession,
Yes.
he's saying everything is just complete drivel and none of it matters and it's all just
Yeah.
complete crap.
Yes, very
And
defensive. Yeah.
what I love about it is Sharon pulls this straight back around and puts it on him and relates it all to being a coach instead.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yes.
okay, so you think you think just because I get paid to listen to people's problems, you think I don't care? Would you coach for free? No. Well, or would you coach for free? Yes, I would. But do you? No.
Yeah. And
So
does that mean you
does that
care any
mean
less? Yeah.
yeah, does that mean you care any less? No. So
Yes. Because that
it's a
was kind of
little bit of chipping away, chipping away.
yes.
Dr. Sharon's got a tiny
Perspective.
little chisel out,
Yeah.
and she's not a big jackhammer. She's got a
No,
tiny little
she's giving
chisel
him
out.
she's giving him that little bit of perspective because yeah, what he said to her was that, yeah, you don't know me. You just sit in here and listen to me and act like you care, but you don't care. You get paid to listen to me, and I don't believe that you really care about what I'm saying or care to even know anything real about me, kind of thing, is what he ended up kind of yelling at her and kind of storming out. Because the first couple times, it's like he eases into this kind of stress about it. He goes in there, he's kind of talking too much, cracking jokes,
Yeah.
deflecting, and then he's just like, I can't do this. And he leaves. And
Yeah.
then I think the second time, or like the first time, he's like laying down and he's like, I don't know where I should sit. Should I sit in this chair? Should I lay down on the couch? And all this kind of thing. And like,
Yes.
panic joking Ted. So then the second time, I think he comes and he's very kind of similar, just like evasive, doesn't know what to say, doesn't, feel comfortable. And then he's like, I don't want to talk about this. And he leaves. And then the third time is when he kind of gets like, I think it's the third time at least. I think
Yeah.
yeah,
Is when
at
he
least
gets
that
rude.
when he gets rude like that. So then, he comes back and he feels bad and he apologizes and he admits that like she says like, I think the first time she's like, I didn't expect you to come back. And then like she does kind of admit that like I was waiting for you to come back because he says he doesn't quit things. So that's why he kind of admits that like why he keeps coming back after these outbursts. And then we
Yeah.
learn why he doesn't, why it's important for him to not quit things. Um but yeah,
We do
it's really
at the end of
at the
the
end of
next
the second
episode,
episode.
we learn that.
Yes. So really interesting to see an incredibly vulnerable Ted like this. That, there's things he doesn't want to talk about, that he,
Yeah.
doesn't want to be completely honest about something, that he's really guarded. And he has all this stigma built up about therapy because of the therapy he went through with his ex-wife. He always felt like ganged up on in those sessions, like he wasn't really being heard, that it was kind of all about her. Um, and that's kind of a difficult thing for him. So he has all of that kind of built up stigma behind that experience with his wife, that he just kind of already goes into it with this negative attitude. So once the third time comes around and she gives him that perspective of, obviously I do care, obviously I'm here to listen. Um, then he kind of is able to ease into talking to her and starting this whole kind of process because he knows he needs it. So
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously an awful lot to admire about Ted as a human being,
yeah,
Ted as a character, as a personality. I think if we all were a little bit more like Ted Lasso, the world would be a much more wonderful place.
yes,
Yet the tough thing in watching this is that, I can look at myself as somebody who wants to bring smiles to those around me.
yeah,
But why is that? Is it because of similar kinds of things that Ted is masking over?
yes.
It gives
Mhm.
you a sense of personal kind
Perspective
of
and yeah, introspection.
perspective,
Yeah,
personal introspection that this whole show does in
yeah,
all of its different character types. And I think it's because it presents its main characters as very, very simple to understand
yeah,
and then gives them depth. It doesn't present them immediately as fully grey, kind of all over the place, deeply flawed human beings. It presents them very, very simple. Ted, happy go lucky.
yeah,
Beard, witty. Roy, gruff.
yes,
Jamie, arrogant. It's really,
yeah,
really very, very straightforward. And bit by bit, it's just giving each of them depth,
a
giving
little bit
each
more.
of
Yeah,
them something within themselves that is off kilter, something within themselves that needs personal fixing. And that's
yeah.
fine. That's
Hmm.
that's that's being a person. And I think it's so good at making you, the viewer, look at your own self and
Yeah,
how you live your life and you deal with your relationships with however many other people
yeah,
there are in your life. I've never come across a television show that's quite as subtly capable of being able to do that.
Yes, it shows all the shades of people. Like, in this episode, we see Beard be very perceptive and kind of watching things and really focus on the importance of talking to other people and communicating because he sees Nate do something that's not so great and he immediately goes and talks to him. So you think,
Nate
oh,
to the not so great, we'll be calling him
yes.
shortly.
Yes, and so, we think, Beard has a really, a thoughtful, smart head on his shoulders, but then we see how he is in his very messy relationship with Jane.
Yeah.
He's not very good at that at all.
He's
But
so rational, yet so irrational.
exactly. So, just a very clear example of somebody who shows those kinds of shades. And then even in the next episode, we get to see Dr. Sharon kind
Yeah.
of be a little bit messy as well, and just remind you that therapists are not perfect. Like, I think people have that misconception and think they're,
Yeah,
like, not human, that
therapists are
they
perfect emotional people who
Yes.
understand everything, but therapists have therapists, and this is the
Yeah.
messy thing about humanity, I suppose, isn't it? Is that
Yes. Yeah.
there are no absolutely perfect people, and it's terrifying to think of. It
Yeah.
can be.
Mhm.
It can be upsetting, I think, to think of as well.
Yeah.
But you've almost got to. I think as long as you understand the why, sometimes that can be
Yeah,
enough.
and I think
Because
that's where
you can never be absolutely perfect. Nobody can ever be absolutely perfect. But if you understand the why something within you is the way it is,
yeah.
you can help overcome it. You can help block it out as
Yeah.
much as humanly possible. Not all the time, never all the time, will never happen all the time.
Yes, and I think
But
with
you can help.
therapists yeah, and I think with therapists, which we'll kind of see in the next episode with Sharon, is that, like, they are so close to it, it's hard for them to see those things in themselves, but they can
Yeah,
see it, but when they're outside of it, it's easy for them to kinda see those things in other people and know how to talk to them and relate to them.
yeah,
But when it's them, they're kind of too close to it, they understand it a little too much that they can get defensive about being that or feeling that way or being that kind of person. So they need a therapist to kind of do the same for them. So
yeah,
yeah, I like kind of what you said about Ted and being an example of just the shades that we see these characters. We kind of pinpoint them as one clear thing, and then as the seasons have gone on, as we've learned more about them, we kind of sprinkle on a little bit more substance and character and deepness and darker aspects and more
yeah.
emotional heavier aspects about each one, that they're not completely perfect, or they're not just this one kind of presenting thing that they give us.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really.
Yeah.
I mean, in this particular episode, the third character who goes through a certain change of headspace, as well as we would say, is
Yeah.
Nate, who
Yeah.
is continuing his journey of self-importance, but also power hungriness. Power
Yes, the
getting to
ego.
his head, the ego
Yes.
problem, and
Yeah, that
it's
he's
the
never
ego
had,
prop
and
that he's
so
never had, and this is why I think, and I go back to it all the time, that Nate leaving Richmond and becoming West Ham manager was something I always knew happened
yeah.
in this show. So I always knew that was coming. It was just getting to see the why that
Yeah.
happened, and in seeing the why that happens, obviously not the final straw at this point, but in seeing the build up of the why that happens, I do not agree at all with all those people I remember seeing at the time on social media hating on the character of Nate for betraying Richmond in that way, because I actually feel a great deal of sympathy for Nate, because it is understandable as to why he's like that.
Yeah.
His father is so
Cold.
distant from him,
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
cold. No wonder he always wants to impress people. No wonder he feels like he's absolutely worthless.
Yeah.
And no wonder when he gets a little bit of praise, from a lot of people that he is completely overwhelmed by
Consumed
it
by it. Yeah.
and consumed by it. What did you expect would happen with him? He's not
Yeah.
a perfect person either.
Yeah.
He means well. He does mean well. And it is a perfect example. I think it's probably the clearest example that we've gotten at this point, because we've not seen, Roy's family relationship or anything like that. We've
Yeah.
not seen Ted's childhood or anything
No.
like that. But we've seen Nate's family relationship.
Yeah.
We've seen Nate's family dynamic. We understand now why he is the way he is. And I think in doing that, I understand. I don't like that he ultimately will leave Richmond in
Yeah.
this kind of hoity-toity, I'm better than you lot way.
Yeah.
But I understand why he does do that, and I understand why he thinks he's capable of doing that, because he's
Yes.
getting all these swathes of praise all the time. Wonder Kid, Wonderkind, whatever you want to call it, you
Yeah.
know.
Yes. So I really am curious to see if there will be anything that he does kind of down the line before this shift happens that will make you feel the way the internet felt
I
when
mean,
you
he's
kind of
not.
learned about
Yeah,
this.
I mean, he's
Um,
not being nice to people. I
n-
get that. He's being
yeah.
very, very unpleasant to people. He's
But if
unpleasant
I
to Colin,
remember,
particularly. He's unpleasant
yes.
to his kit boy a
Yeah.
great deal. He's being very unlikable in those moments, but
Yes.
none of it comes without understanding as to why
The
he's being that
why
way.
he's like that. If I remember correctly, he does do something pretty awful on the way out.
I mean,
So
I can believe it. I can
we'll
believe
have
it.
to see if that will kind of sway you into like feeling at least a little bit the way that the kind of internet felt when that happened. But
I mean, I
yeah,
guess it might, but I just go back to the fundamentals of it, and I feel like I understand the fundamentals of
yeah,
his ultimate decision.
yeah.
The details almost don't matter. The
Okay.
details are just expression of that.
Okay.
So
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see.
we will see.
But
We will see.
yes, yeah, how he is to Colin in this episode. I love that Beard kind of is just watching from the side and sees just how personal it was, how cruel it
Yeah.
was. Because I think the players are kind of razzing him on the pitch at practice, and they all were kind of saying things, but I think he feels like Colin is kind of the weakest one of them. So he feels like, okay, I can, play at picking at him the most.
Well,
Um,
listen, there's nothing wrong with players that do the job just because they're
yes.
not fancy or flashy or do the
Yeah.
most over elaborate things. There's nothing wrong with understated, solid 7 out of 10s every week kind of players.
Yes. And so he kind of says that to Colin, but in a really kind of disgusting way, that he basically is
Yes.
unnecessary. He'll never be a masterpiece. He's like, he's not going to be like a Van Gogh painting or something. I think he kind of compares it
Yeah.
to. He says you're
He
going to be
says,
you're like a hotel room painting. You're
yeah,
just there to cover up some blood on the wall. So just do
yeah.
that. Like just serve your purpose and you'll
It's
never
a
be
really
anything more than that.
horrible analogy
Yes. And then he
to
turns and
actually mean something that could be perceived as very, very positive. Like
yes.
how very reliable you are, Colin. How very
Yes.
consistent you are, Colin. How
Yes.
very understated and under the radar and underappreciated you are, Colin, because you're always there, you're always dedicated, and you do the job and you do it well.
Yeah, but he twists it into this really
But he
gross
twists
thing
it.
of like yes, into this really gross thing, like, you're only good at one thing, and it's not even that great. It's not really that important, so just do your shitty little unimportant job. And then he kind of spins his chair around and goes back to looking at his phone like it didn't even matter, like it didn't even mean
Mm,
anything.
yeah.
And Colin genuinely, like, came to him. He's like, "Hey, man, if there's anything I did, I'm sorry. I just really wanna understand, like, you're upset with me, and I wanna kind of know why." Like, he comes to him really earnestly and like really just kind of wanting to make things right if he did anything wrong. And he just goes off on him like that. And so I love
Yeah.
that Beard was there to witness that, because I think Beard has been there to kind of witness quite a few of the little
He
moments where
has.
he's rude to the Kit Boy and all these different things. And so I love that Beard just kind of appears in his office and tells him, you know, what you said to Colin was really gross and it was really personal and mean. So you need to cut it out. Like, you need to cool it and get your head right, because this is not a good look for you. And then, you know, Nate is kind of taken aback, and then like he turns around and Beard like disappears like Batman. Like,
Yes,
hilarious.
Beard has Beard always disappears just like Batman, really, doesn't he? He has a tendency to do that.
Yes. Yes, which we're gonna see more weird Beard stuff in the next coming episode, I believe.
Yes, I'm led to believe we are. That's going to be quite interesting, isn't it? I think then a good way of bridging the two episodes is our slightly more hilarious, lighter storyline at the
Yes.
moment,
Yes.
which is Rebecca
and
obviously
Sam.
Sam, who
Yes.
don't know they're texting each other and don't know they're in love with each other until they actually agree to meet up for a date and accidentally bump into each other, and then both the phones ping at the same time.
Yes, and then they realize, oh my gosh, we're the ones who have been talking this whole time. How old are you? Like, I don't know. And like, she thinks
I'm
he's at least
21.
24, and then he's like 21. Yes. So she's like, we can't do this. I'm your boss. This is crazy. And he's like, well, let's just, you know, I'm hungry. You're hungry. We're here. It doesn't have to be a date. Let's just have dinner. And we get this really nice montage of them laughing and talking and seemingly getting along incredibly well.
Can we just point out, though, please, how genuinely pleased I think Sam is at this point? He finds out it's actually Rebecca.
Yes,
Rebecca's
like,
terrified about the entire thing, and Sam's there with a massive beam on his face going, oh,
yes.
how exciting, it's you.
Yes, right. So the kind of juxtaposition of how they react is very comical as well. But yeah, they seemingly have a really nice evening. He walks her to her door, and she still cuts it off. She's like, I'm going in alone, and that's kind of the end of this kind of thing. So
There's been a bit of something there.
yes, but there's clearly
brewing.
chemistry, there's clearly attraction, but they kind of let it sit right there. So yeah, we kind of get into that a little bit more in the next episode.
We do,
yeah.
and let's, I think, start this conversation on the next episode by talking about that. This is season 2, episode 8. Man City, rather horribly titled, so I'm going to take that off the screen immediately, because I was I was brought to vomiting by a lot of what happened in this episode, admittedly, and not just from the disgusting behavior of one particular character in this episode, but by all of the obnoxious sea of sky blue that apparently exists, even though it doesn't. But I forgot what I was talking about
You
now.
just got so
Sam and Rebecca. Sam and
incensed
Rebecca.
about it.
I do. Why would I not get incensed about? Okay, right. Let. You know what?
Explain that.
You can start the conversation on Sam and Rebecca. I will say what a load of nonsense it is that in this episode they're having a nice FA Cup semi-final at Wembley, obviously. Not that the FA Cup semi-finals should be played at Wembley, even though they are. That's an argument for, you know...
No, we like the football insight.
Yes, that's an argument for basically not you, because you don't have the context of why having a semi-final at Wembley is fundamentally wrong.
Sense. Yeah.
It happens in the show because it happens in real life. It does happen in real life, but it shouldn't happen in real life. That's the point of it. Wembley as a stadium is the national stadium, right? So no club plays there. It should be reserved for the cup final and England games. Games. That is what it should. There are 2 cup finals, all the playoff finals and all that sort of stuff. Yes, okay. The lower league cup finals as well. Yes, all right. But it should be reserved for cup finals. Wembley. None of this semi-final nonsense. Because do you know why? Because it makes the day less special. It should be exclusive.
Yes.
But no, they're not going to do that because they want it to generate money, don't they? So it's all about that.
The big fancy
Wembley should be
place.
left exclusive,
Yeah.
but it isn't. Semi-finals should be played at neutral grounds up and down the country. You know, if you've got
Okay.
Richmond and City playing each other, why not play it at Villa Park in Birmingham? You know,
Mhm.
you could do that. Perfectly good stadium. You know, if you've got United and Newcastle playing
Yeah.
a cup semi-final, why not play it somewhere else? You know, why not play it at
A neutral
Leeds,
ground.
for
Okay.
example? Something like that.
Okay.
It used to happen. It used to happen before Wembley was rebuilt. And now every semi-final is played at Wembley, and I don't like it at all. But it does make the day less. Basically, if you get to a semi-final, it's the same trip as getting to a final, and then all the fans have to travel to Wembley again
Yeah.
if they win to get to the final, and it's not as special.
Okay.
Doing something twice is obviously not as special as doing something once, is it?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, because I think you
That's
said
the
something.
fundamental of that.
I Yeah.
Also, I'd like to point out,
Yes, I think you also were mentioning to me something very similar about the singing of Blue Moon, that it's
yes,
something that does happen, but not really.
well, no, look, Manchester City fans do sing Blue Moon. Blue Moon. The song Blue Moon, everybody kind of knows the
Yeah.
song Blue Moon.
Yeah.
It's an old song.
Yes.
Um Man City fans do sing that song as a club song. They
Yeah.
do. But never in your life have you ever seen tens of thousands of City fans at Wembley singing Blue Moon, all dressed like they go every week, all dressed like that. Because City
Okay.
don't have any fans, and when the fans they do have aren't any good. So it's a thing that happens,
Yes.
but they are milking it to the millionth
Okay.
degree
Yes,
in
they're
this
just
show.
leveling it up for the circumstances of the show. And
Yeah.
of
Like
course,
here is another football club I don't like, Liverpool, who have just won the Premier League this season, but they have a club song as well. You'll Never Walk Alone. If Richmond were playing Liverpool in this and I saw tens of thousands of Liverpool fans singing You'll Never Walk Alone, I wouldn't like it, but I'd be going, well, at least that actually
it
does happen.
happens. Okay. Okay.
This doesn't actually properly happen.
Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate Morgan's football corner.
Yes.
Football facts.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Every episode of our Ted Lasso breakdowns. Because yeah, I mean, there are rare episodes where we're actually kind of in the stadium and see kind of a big portion of a game sometimes. So when we do, I like to hear kind of the the behind the scenes knowledge that maybe most people don't know who don't live in the UK. So thank you, Morgan,
You're
for the
welcome.
commentary.
Yes. You're welcome. City fans would argue with me as well on that Blue Moon point I'd like to point out, but I will stand my ground.
Okay. I appreciate it. I also appreciate when you said United and you were like United, like it's me. It's us. You like pointed to yourself when you said United.
Yes, it's not. Yes. It's ingrained within me for better or
Yeah.
worse.
Yes, we appreciate that. Um, but yeah, so to get back to Sam and Rebecca, um, yeah, they I think he does try to like reach out to her again, but she doesn't say anything because she doesn't know like how to deal with it. And then it's only after the big game that they lose.
Oh, they lose
And
horrifically as well.
yes, and they're interviewing him, and he kind of, like, is watching her as he's being interviewed and is kind of more
Yeah.
focused on that than really the loss or, what he's saying. But he
Which
kind of
isn't a
ends up
great look, Sam, but
well, yes, but he ends
okay.
up saying something that kind of relates to, like, him and her in the
He
interview,
does. Yes, he does.
like, "As long as you try and take a chance," and that kinda stuff. And so when she gets home, she's listening to his interview, and he's saying those things, and so it makes her think of him, and so she does message him, to come over or that, to come over, she wants to see him, And so he sends his address. So she's just like, okay, I'm gonna go. She like, downs her wine. She gets her shoes on, grabs her coat, goes to the door, and he's out there waiting at the door. And she's like, why did you give me your address? And he's like, for next time.
Swoon, swoon,
Yes,
swoon, Prince Sam.
you
At
know
this
me and the romance aspects of anything. I was just
Yes, and it's nice.
um
They come together, the door
they
closes as
kiss,
they
they
begin
make
to kiss.
out,
It's
and
very
yes,
nice.
very steamy. So that is
Very
going
steamy.
somewhere for sure. Also we see, I think in this episode, this kind of funny running gag in the gym, which sets up kind of Jamie's thing that he's gonna go through in this episode. Sam's dad calls him and he tells him like the oil company that was kind of ruining his
Yes.
home, they've been dismantled and they're gone.
Yeah,
And
they've
it's
been forced to leave Nigeria or something.
Yes, and so, his father thanks him for, standing up for that, and it's partly because he made such a big public statement about that,
Yeah,
that happened, and so and he's having this nice phone call with his father on speakerphone, his father telling him how much he loves him, and
yeah,
Jamie's, like, helping Colin, like, he's spotting Colin on the weights, and he's just listening to this conversation and seeing just like what a functioning father son relationship looks like, and he's
yeah.
just kind of feeling bad about his own, and then drops like the weight on Colin.
There's an awful lot of father son interesting
Yes. Oh
dynamics in this
no,
whole show.
this happens in, I think, in the previous episode, because he asked for the haircut to go on the date with Rebecca.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
Yes,
But
because that happens to Colin again. He asked the captain, who,
yeah,
only he was like an artist with haircuts, and he only gives you one haircut a season, so you have to be very specific when you ask for it. And so when Rebecca finally responds to him, but he doesn't know it's Rebecca, that she'll say she'll meet up with him, he asked for the haircut, and when he asked for the haircut, he's the one spotting Colin and drops the weight on
yes,
Colin. So yes,
yes,
that happened in the previous episode, but setting that up, that Jamie thing for the next episode. Because I think Jamie's father's texting him, hey, where are my tickets? Get me tickets to this game. And
yeah,
Jamie's kind of trying to ignore him. I like when he goes and talks to Higgins and asks, because he knows Higgins has 100 kids, so he's like, Higgins, and a set of characters that we've never really seen interact. I think I've talked about, like, when we get to see kind of pairings that we don't normally get to see.
yeah,
I love when we see like Ted and Keeley hanging out, Roy and Rebecca, things like that. So Nate, when he was with Keeley and
yeah,
Rebecca, and they're kind of giving him advice. So I liked, Jamie and Higgins, two characters you never really think about seeing together, him going to him for advice, to talk about his dad. So we are kind of like peppering in those kind of things of, and obviously we know kind of how tumultuous that relationship. She talked about, his mother being this good in him, and his father being kind of the
yeah,
worst bit of him, and it kind of shows why he was such a bully in season one, because his father is
yeah.
as a big bully, and his father really only came around, and when he became this big soccer star, football star. Sorry.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
obviously saw that
Yeah.
interaction late in the previous
Yeah.
season as
He
well.
won. He
When
made that winning
yeah,
kick, but his father still berated him because he passed.
yeah, Jamie relegates Richmond, but obviously,
It's not good enough
he
because
still
he didn't
gets
make the
a
winning shot.
barrage of abuse from his own father.
Yes.
But that's all we've seen
Yes.
at this point. That's all we've seen of
Yes.
Jamie and his father.
Yes. So we see him have
This
this
episode then
jealousy.
obviously happens.
Yeah. So we see him have this jealousy of Sam's relationship, because I think when they show that quite a bit too, of Jamie always kind of seeing when Sam talks about his relationship with his father. I think we've seen it kind
Yeah,
of, they always kind of pan to him, or he's listening or watching or something like that when Sam is talking about his father. Um, so yeah, I really like him going to Higgins and asking him, my father's asking for tickets for him and his friends. I don't know, you know, if I should invite them, and what should I do? We have like a terrible relationship. He's an awful person, kind of thing. And Higgins is like, yeah, I think we all kind of have that. Um, but I think it's more about forgiving them for not being the father that you want them to be. Like, just forgiving
I
them
mean,
for who they are and
look,
not
I don't disagree with Higgins when he says
yeah.
this, but I think there is certain instances when cutting someone off entirely is the better
It's
option.
the best thing. But, Higgins has no real context, like, he
He
doesn't know the
doesn't.
full story. So,
Nobody has any real context
except maybe
until,
Ted,
except maybe Ted,
'cause I think
but
he sees him hit
until,
him. Yeah,
yeah, until this particular episode, until after this game, this horrific semi-final loss,
yeah,
5-0 Richmond loss to City. His dad, Jamie's dad, and his two incredibly obnoxious friends
yeah,
are there as City fans, being utterly
completely obnoxious.
deplorable in the
Yeah,
crowd and everything like
yes,
that.
yeah.
We see it all, and then how this is legally allowed to happen, I've no idea. But somehow Mr. Tart ends up coming in behind into the changing
So
rooms and
yeah.
somehow getting in. He's there as a fan,
Yeah, I mean,
but
they ask
apparently he's
him
just let inside.
well, and somebody's like, "Hey, Jamie, someone's here to see you. Is it okay if he comes in?" And he's like, "He's your dad." And he's like, "Yeah, okay." So then his father comes in and he starts berating him in front of everybody in the
He starts
locker room.
berating everybody though, and starts
Yes,
making stupid
and
jokes and
bragging,
saying how
and bragging
terrible
about
everybody is.
yes, bragging about his team winning, blaming Jamie. Well, if you hadn't done that stupid show, you would have still been on this team, and
Yeah,
now you're with a bunch of losers, and um, just making fun of everybody. And
much as
so,
though I think Jamie's dad appears like he's on a lot of hard drugs, to be honest with you. I think
yeah, like, or
he's a
he's
very
super.
erratic, kind of dirty
Yes,
looking man.
yes, he's very scroungy. And so Jamie kind of says, "Don't talk to me like that." And he keeps, "Oh, you're a big man
Quietly.
now."
Says it
Yes,
quietly.
he says it several times, like, "Don't talk to me like that." And his father making fun of him standing up for himself, to where it kind of builds, and then Jamie punches him in the face. And
Yes.
and his
Which
father
we
still
all
continue
celebrate that.
yes, and his father still kind of berating him. And I think it's really interesting too to see Nate watching this moment as well.
Mm, yeah.
Um, because, Jamie was a huge bully of his. And
Yeah.
so, I often wonder, what is Nate thinking? Is Nate feeling kind of cocky about this? Is he feeling a bit of kinship that, like, Jamie doesn't have the best relationship with his father, like he doesn't have the best relationship with his father? Is there a sense of understanding that this is why he maybe treated me the way he treated me? Or
Yeah.
is Nate just very kind of in a like serves him right to have
Vindictive.
yes, or does he have a
Yeah.
vindictive thought? So I always kind of
I would
wonder what
feel
Nate is feeling when he's kind of watching this go down.
I like that thought, and I would feel that he's looking at it from that vindictive
Smug.
standpoint,
Yeah.
but he shouldn't be. Look, Nate's relationship with his father is not anywhere near as bad as this
Oh,
one.
no, definitely not. But just to kind of see, oh, Jamie seems like this perfect guy, that everybody loves. He's so cool and good at everything and handsome and all this stuff. He must have this perfect charmed life. So to kind of see like his dad, puts him down like my dad puts me down kind of thing. Like he could see
Yeah.
that. He could understand why Jamie treated him the way he did in the past because his father was a bully and that made him a bully kind of thing. But yeah, I kind of found myself, since I've seen this before, I found myself watching Nate. And so I liked kind of like,
Okay.
oh, I don't think I thought about that before, but I found myself kind of watching him watch this and kind of think about what he was thinking about. But somebody who does ultimately kind of find this bit of kinship through that is, once he punches him, his father's still kind of carrying on, and I love Beard
Yeah.
kind of grabbing him and
Yeah.
hitting
Beard
him on the
kicks him
door,
out.
hit him on the door and, like, throws him out. Roy just walks up to Jamie and gives him a hug,
Yeah.
and
Just
it's
a
like
quiet.
yeah,
Everybody's dead silent. I mean, at
yeah,
this point, because everybody's there. But
yeah,
it is just this quiet bit of understanding, finally,
yes,
I suppose, between
yes,
Roy
so
and Jamie.
everyone kind of gets, "Okay, this is why he is the way he is," and
Yeah.
Ted watching this whole kind of father-son relationship play out in front of him, he kind of panics. and goes
Yes.
outside, and he calls Dr. Sharon, and I think is that when he calls her?
It is when he calls her.
Yes.
Yeah, it is when he calls her.
Yes, and he says, "My father killed himself." And so we kind of know, okay, his father, and he sees that as like, his father quitting on
Yeah.
him, his father quitting on his mother, and so that's
It's a
why
very
he doesn't.
harsh way of thinking, but you
Yes,
can understand it.
yes, and that's why he is so determined to not quit things, because
Yeah.
he sees his father that way. And it kind of is a mirror of something that happened earlier with Dr. Sharon. She kind of went through something called TED, and she, called him just to tell him how she was feeling. She didn't need him to advise her or make jokes or anything. She just wanted him to know how she was feeling. And so
Yeah.
she kind of lays that groundwork for him. So then when he is kind of has these big emotions, he calls her to just share that with her. And she asks him, "Are you ready to talk about this?" And he's like, "No, I just wanted you to know how I felt." And it mirrors kind of how she did that for him, with him,
Yeah.
on her end with her feelings. So I like that she, has opened him up to this idea that we don't have to delve into things, but it's better to kind of at least release it, get it out there, have somebody there to know, remind yourself that someone's there to listen, so that you can kind of process it, and then you have a clearer head to go into talking about it when you're ready. So, yeah, she kind of laid that groundwork throughout this episode for him. And so at the end, when he has these really big emotions, I think normally Ted would just bottle them in, and then it would kind of manifest into an anxiety attack that
Yeah.
we've seen him have. But here he's able to at least express it, get it out, and say, "Yeah, my father killed himself. He left me and my mother, and it was difficult. And that's why I don't quit things." And he just wants to leave it at that for that moment. He's like, "No, I'm not quite ready to go into it, but I just wanted you to know, and I wanted you
And
to know how I was feeling." So,
here's
yeah.
another slightly messy father-son dynamic that this
Yeah.
show presents.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of things, and it's not just direct father-son either. It's father figure and son figure.
Yeah.
It's uncle and niece in Roy and Phoebe's
Yeah.
sense.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's that kind of. I think the whole show is great at confronting and dealing with masculine figures in one's life to look up to. That's a very
Yes.
poorly
Well,
worded way of
even
saying that, but you
well,
understand what I mean.
yes, well, even Rebecca and how she views her father and his treatment of her
Yeah,
mother. So
yeah.
we delved into that as well, and kind of her father-daughter relationship, and how she kind of, it, because her father is so terrible, it makes her pity her mother. And so
Mm,
that kind of weird thing, of how that relationship plays out. So yeah, I think fathers and father figures are definitely a huge kind of running theme, and
yeah,
commentary of different
as it
dynamics
should be.
on the show. Yeah, and I like
As
how kind of all our characters deal with it differently, see it differently. I think, it speaks to kind of what Higgins was saying about everyone kind of having a weird relationship with their father,
yeah,
and a difficult maybe relationship with them. And so we get to kind of see that illustrated, particularly in this episode with, all our characters. So,
yeah, and I love that it's getting stronger and stronger in that sense because
yeah.
at the end of the day, this is a show about football. It's about much more than football, but it's a
Yeah.
show about football. And if there's nothing more father and son in Britain than the concept of football, it doesn't. There isn't anything
Yeah.
more father and son in
Yeah.
Britain than the concept of football, and you can imagine, as I'm sure is very much the case in any sort of sport, but the intensity of certain parents towards children playing football and things like that, and it's just very, very. It's a difficult psychological area, I
Yeah.
guess. The idea of the star 8-year-old player, for example,
Mhm.
on this one team, and said 8-year-old's father being obnoxious and being intense and aggressive and
Yeah.
doing nothing but, you know, saying you need to be better, you need to be better, you need to be better
Mhm.
all and the time over and over and over again.
Yeah.
coming from this place of wanting to see the best for your child, but
Yeah.
not actually knowing how to properly make that happen,
Yeah.
not actually knowing how to properly encourage that.
Yeah.
It just comes out in this desperation almost. It comes out in this aggression. And
Yes.
this, while there's little of Ted Lasso that focuses on the specifics of that I've just explained, the fact that it is so heavily dealing with various different father-son dynamics is so pitch perfect for this show,
Yeah.
because of how it all relates to the wider idea of growing up surrounded by football
Yeah.
and growing up surrounded by this idea of, if you are good as a kid,
Mhm.
you sometimes might be unfortunate enough to get a parent that is horrible, in that sense, that is overly
Like,
controlling, that is
yes.
just like Mr. Tart
Yeah.
kind of was, because he just came around for all the good stuff and then
Yeah.
punched him down when he didn't do it well. When
Didn't
what
do it
you
the way he
actually want to
thought he
be
should do it.
like,
Yeah.
what you actually want to be like is what Jamie's mother was like,
Yes, or how
you know,
Ted is with his son.
or how Ted is with his son, always there,
Mhm.
but shuts up, isn't loud, you
Yeah.
know, but always there and always kind
Or
of,
even Ted, how he is with his players, like, even when a loss
yeah,
comes around, he doesn't let them wallow in it, his whole motto is, like, "Be like a goldfish and move on to the next, and you still did a great
yeah,
job, and, you know, be happy for the effort that you put in that whole kinda thing." So, you talk about fathers and father figures, Ted kind of being this father figure to the team and being this kind of
exactly,
positive force for them, as opposed to kind of
exactly,
berating them when they lose or something like that. So, yeah, I think we delved pretty deep into those kinds of dynamics, which I think is an interesting kind of juxtaposition that you made with kind of football and father-son relationships as well, which I think is really cool. So,
yeah,
yeah, then our kind of big point of story in this episode is Dr. Sharon. I think we open with her getting on her bike, going for a nice ride. She puts on her
yeah.
music, and we get this kind of montage of her getting to see more personality from her. Some guy gets in her way while she's on her bike, and she kind of cusses him out and tells him his shirt is stupid looking. Um, so we get this really good sensibility about her, and I think even before she leaves, we hear her on a phone call with her therapist, and she's
Yeah,
complaining about Ted, who she's been complaining to about Ted and how he is super defensive and obnoxious and constantly makes silly jokes to deflect, and she's having a hard time kind of cracking the code of him, and he's obnoxious and he drives her nuts. And her therapist saying, "You're more like him than you think." And she's like, "Oh, hell no, I'm not like him." And then she kind of lists all the things that she does that are very similar to how she describes Ted. And she's like, "Okay, mate." So I
we,
like
they,
kind of,
I mean, all in all, we just see that we've
she's
spoke
human.
about it briefly in the
Yeah.
past, but yeah, Dr. Sharon's messy herself, and it's
Yeah.
important for us to see that.
Yes. And so, as we're kind of on this montage of her really enjoying the day riding her bike, she ultimately gets into an accident with a car, and she ends up calling Ted to be
She
her,
does,
yes, her kind of emergency
weirdly.
contact. So she's kind of concussed, so she's not really in her right mind, and I guess she called him, and she's like, why did you even come?" And he's like, "'Cause you called me and left me like 32 weird random voice messages, like this one like you're singing, like this one you're like saying terrible things about me and laughing at me."
Yes.
And like, and even when he comes and picks her up at the hospital, he's just like being his silly self, and like all the nurses and doctors really like him, and she's just like just like
Yes.
annoyed.
She's very perturbed by the
Yes.
presence of Ted.
Yes, but Ted is having a lot of fun showing her like the crazy voice messages that she was sending him. And, she's a little embarrassed, but she starts to kind of laugh a little bit, but she's still trying to kind of hold that professional line with him,
Yeah.
even though you can see him kind of chipping away at her a little bit in the good way.
You
So he
can.
finally, and we get a little more glimmers of like kind of maybe her struggling a little bit when Ted finally like brings her home, and we get a look at her place. There's alcohol bottles everywhere, wine
Yeah.
bottles, booze bottles, and she's kind of immediately trying to hide them. She's trying to throw them away, and dump them out, kind of, to hide that she's kind of maybe drinks a lot to cope with a lot of whatever things she's dealing with. Um, and so yeah, I like that we get to see kind of a real, little bit messy Dr. Sharon. So Ted kind of says, if you need me, just call me, and later in the episode, he calls her because he's like, I'm going to call you every 20 minutes because, you had a concussion. And so I need to check on you. And every time I call you, I'm going to keep it fresh and like do a silly voice every time kind of thing.
But she obviously can't think of anything worse than that.
Yes.
But he does it anyway.
Yes, but at a certain point, she's kind of sitting and she decides to call him and tell him that she was scared. She was scared
Yeah.
today because riding her bike is her favorite thing to do. And she felt like, she would be, today was the day she was going to be afraid to do her favorite thing. And that really scared her. And Ted kind of tries to go into like giving her this pep talk. She's like, I don't need a pep talk. I don't need any advice. I just wanted to call you and tell you how I was feeling. I wanted you to know how I was feeling. And so Ted really, really feels special that she chose him to kind of tell him that, and that she,
Yeah.
is expressing these feelings to him, these personal feelings, because she's very much always professional line with him. So the fact that she, did that is what kind of opens him up later to do the same. And so I love getting to see the growth of their relationship, the openness between them, and her kind of maybe also realizing that they are more alike than she thinks, and that this is probably the best way to approach helping Ted, as
Yeah.
opposed, because I think she was still trying to figure out the best way to help him, the best way to kind of communicate and relate to him. And I think through this, she found it. So I like kind of the little bump of development we get to see with their relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I'm incredibly interested to see where it all goes
Yeah.
next. I know the very next episode we have our weird beard spin-off special,
Yeah.
as you've told me. But
Yeah.
after these two, it's been left in such an interesting psychological place, I
Yeah.
think,
Hmm.
the show. And the end of season 2, I just think is going to be a doozy.
Yeah. Yes. So
So
I'm really curious to see your feelings on kind of when we get closer to the end. Oh, also a big thing was um Ted, before they go out to play the Man City game, Ted tells them the truth about why he stepped away at that other game.
well, that's true.
Where
Yes,
Nate
that's right.
stepped up. He said, "I didn't leave because I was having stomach issues. I left because I was having a panic attack. I've been
Yeah.
having them and I've been struggling with that, but I'm working on it." And so they all kind of are really appreciative. And again, I'm watching Nate here. And I think
Okay.
Nate is kind of taking this very differently than the kind of supportive response of the other guys. I don't know if you were able to pick up on that or if you felt that.
I didn't, admittedly, but I can imagine it was something along the lines of, "Oh, so you have flaws. Ha ha ha
Y-
ha. I can get
Yes.
in there."
Yes, that's kind of how, because I don't think I really paid attention to that, because I think this is maybe my third time watching the whole show through.
Oh, wow,
Um
okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, I like that now I'm, like, watching Nate more and to see kind of his reactions to things, and so this
Yeah,
reaction was very kind of, like, not on the same level as the other guys who were very supportive,
interesting.
who then also admitted a little thing that a
They do.
mistake or
Yes,
something
they
that they
do.
do wrong, which is great. Um
Interesting.
Yes, and I think one last thing was just with Nate, uh, they all kind of come together to get him a jersey that says Wonder
Yes.
Kid on the back, and it's Wonder
Yes.
Kid because he messed up saying that, but he still kind of tries to deflect, "Oh, no, I said Wonder Kid," and everyone's like, "Nope, you clearly said Wonder Kid." So, but they try to embrace it, like, "That's your fun thing that you said, and it
Yeah.
applies to you, and we're not making fun of you for getting the word wrong." Um And so the Kit Boy actually kind of put together, and everyone says, "Oh yeah, it was his idea." But it's really a nice gesture. It's meant to be
Yeah,
an honestly nice
it's a
gesture.
nice fun gift.
Yes. And then Nate, he's scrolling, constantly scrolling to read all of the good accolades he's been getting, and he sees one negative comment. He's like, "Oh yeah, he did this one good thing, but he still seems like a total loser to me." He reads
Yeah,
one bad comment, and he immediately takes the jersey, goes to the kit man, in a quiet room, and says, "If you do anything like this to make fun of me ever again, I will make sure you never forget it." And he like insults him, threatens him, and like
yeah.
throws the jersey at him, and then goes to back to sitting down and scrolling on his phone again. So yeah,
He couldn't make podcasts, could he, Nate? If he gets
no,
one negative comment on the,
no, he's
like, you
done.
got this fact wrong.
Yes,
Oh God, never again. Let's not do
yes.
anything ever again.
So
And just
even
go and throw
Yeah.
something.
So even after Beard's warnings, he's still very much taking on this ego and hurt,
Yeah,
and, you know, constantly just assumes people are making fun of him because they always have. And he can't
yeah,
take compliments because he feels like it's all in jest kind of thing. So he takes this really nice gesture and taints it with his own kind of negative emotions. And yeah, it's still happening. We feel like Beard got in there, but no,
he's trying. He's
it's
trying, but
still
it's not going to work, is it?
yeah, so it's still there. So that's kind of where we leave things with these
Yes,
two
it is
episodes.
interesting.
Yeah.
We only get more and more
Yeah.
into Ted Lasso as we go on. I think great couple of
Yeah.
episodes. It really, really was. We will, of course, be back in a couple of weeks with episodes 9 and 10 of season
Yeah.
2. After, of course, next week, alternating every week on the It's a Wonderful Podcast YouTube channel. On Morgan Hasn't Seen TV is this show with Discovering Dawson's Creek, of
Yes.
course. Do subscribe, ding the notification bell on this channel for all the fun stuff we have here. Subscribe to the main It's a Wonderful Podcast feed as well, of course, wherever you get your podcasts on all major platforms. For Morgan Hasn't Seen, the parent show and the main show, of course, celebrating old movies every week. Other things have been scrolling down at the bottom
Yes.
of the screen. All episode long, Patreon, donation links, merch, all the social medias, all that fun stuff you can find in the description of this episode. Which means, Jeannine, there is only one thing left to do. And obviously, as always, we'll have a nice Roy Kent impression, please. Get your voice down there. 3, 2, 1. Bye.